The light of day had broke early in the morning. Ben had rolled over in bed, flopping onto the ground with a groan. He felt sweat pouring down his face. It was a nightmare, but he barely remembered it. Something to do with Ghost Freak. He hadn't used that transformation in a while for a reason. It wasn't even the first time this kind of dream had happened. It had been something of a routine these days. It was just kind of how he woke up every now and then. Especially because he had been going to bed pretty tired lately. The world seemed determined to drag every last bit of energy out of him. The last big thing was the throwdown at the mall, which had only been a few days ago at this point. Ben winced at the sun as he glanced around the room. Of course his family was out of bed already. Those guys just didn't know how to relax. He guessed he was just glad about not being dragged out of bed first thing in the morning. At least they let him sleep. Of course, the second that thought formed in his mind, the universe decided it had to prove him wrong. A loud thudding sound rang from the outside. Ben groaned as he went out to look at the window, his hand already drifting towards the Omnitrix, only for him to stop dead, pulling the hand away. It wasn't an enemy. There were no monsters rampaging outside the shack. Instead, it looked like his family was piling a bunch of stuff into the rust bucket. A water tank, a food stand, a bunch of things really. Like they were getting ready to plan a carnival or something. Oh, crap, Ben thought to himself. Thoughts began ringing through his mind. His grunkle definitely had a habit of getting into get-rich-quick schemes. Thankfully, as of yet, he hadn't been involved. It was usually Dipper and Mabel getting dragged into working at the shop, probably because they were a bit easier to grab. When they weren't fighting somewhere, Ben and Gwen were usually with Grandpa Max, and he wasn't going to let them get dragged into free labor. But Ben saw his sister out there helping too. She was lifting one of the larger machines, the dunk tank, onto the trailer hitched to the back of Max's RV. What were they trying to get dragged into? Maybe if I draw the curtains, the light from the watch won't show? Ben thought to himself, as he thought how far Accelerate could get him away from the cabin in 10 minutes. Oh, no you don't, he heard as a hand dropped down onto his shoulder. He spun around to see Mabel's face, already mid-pout. A chill moved up his spine as he realized just how screwed he was. Geez, relax, cuz. You look like you've seen a ghost or something. Where is Stan dragging us? Ben said, hanging his head down. He had already given up. She tilted her head. You know, I don't really know, actually. Bronco Max said we wouldn't really have to work too much, though. Just help set up for something. After that, we can go have fun. Apparently it's a holiday or something. As her voice rang through the air, Ben felt himself relaxing just a little bit, although a thought did cross his mind. They were in Gravity Falls. This place had proven to be nothing even remotely normal so far, and he didn't know of any holidays that were happening today, so it was probably something specific to this little place. Mabel, did Stan tell you what holiday it was? Ben asked. Mabel furrowed her brow. You know, I think he did mention it, but I wasn't really paying attention. I think it was something like Pioneer Day, Stan growled, his eye twitching as he looked around. Ben could understand why. It was like they had stepped into a window to the past. Everyone was wearing old-timey stuff. There were no cars on the street aside from theirs. It was people in horse-drawn carriages, of all things. Thankfully, the place wasn't completely committed to the bit. There were a few modern stands, which he supposed was why Stan wanted to come here. A few places on the side that sold actual food instead of food straight out of the 1800s. There were even a few games set up that actually looked like a decent amount of fun, games invented after the turn of the century. But the majority of the people around were still pretty committed to the bit, to the point that a couple of people were even looking in awe at the rust bucket. Why would you do this to us? Ben asked. It also didn't help that they were fairly close to the lake. The same lake where they had to fight a giant robotic monster and aliens a few weeks ago. In the back of his head, he was almost sure history would repeat itself. This was a pretty good setting for it. Hey, money doesn't grow on trees, kid. Stan bellowed out as they finished setting up the dunk tank, including the faulty trigger he installed to make it practically impossible for anybody to actually dunk him. Zeus looked particularly proud after helping with that. Out of all the 4 kids, Ben was probably the only one who noticed. He gave a little nod of respect to the trick. It's the kind of thing he would have done. There are plenty of people in this whole town who are bored of the whole pioneer shtick, so I'm gonna give them something better to do. I can't believe you, of all people, are helping with this. Ben looked over to his grandfather, who gave Stan a look. It was a different look than Ben was used to him giving Stan. There was no disappointed glare in it, more of a look of understanding. He shook it off as he looked to his grandson. Oh, I'm not helping with the stand today. Zeus here has that covered. Right, son? He asked the boy in the question mark shirt, who nodded, shooting Max an intense thumbs up. You got it, dude, he replied, practically saluting him. Max smiled gently, turning back to the kids. I'm only here because I heard there's some rare mushrooms going around the fair setup. I plan on scooping up a few for dinner tonight. Gwen gagged next to her brother as they shared the same we need a plan look. If their grandfather was making dinner, that meant only one thing. Death. No, death would be too good. A fate worse than that. Dipper had managed to remain stoic, but he too was panicking on the inside. The only one of the family tree who was calm on the inside was Mabel. And Dipper knew why. She had regularly made things that were way worse than whatever Max could cook up. He had been on the receiving end of the 70 different recipes for Mabel juice the girl had concocted over the years, several of which were definitely not edible. The kids were so wrapped up in their own thoughts about what they might be suffering through dinner that they completely missed the second look that Max and Sam had given each other. One devoid of the usual jovial looks they had given the kids. One full of a kind of serious understanding. The look soon faded, as Max lit up once again, the kids none the wiser. Now, why don't you kids all go off and have some fun, yeah? He asked, the four of them taking the immediate excuse that he granted them to bolt, as they all disappeared off into the crowd. Wow, this place is big, Mabel wondered aloud, as she looked around her, several dozen people whirling around her like a tornado. A lot of them were working on a stage in the center of the area, one big enough that a gigantic concert could easily be held there. They must really take this pioneer thing seriously. You think there's gonna be a magic show or something? Gwen next to her narrowed her eyes at the big sign being erected over the stand, one easily the size of the stand itself, big enough to be seen over half of the buildings in Gravity Falls. Whatever show was going on, they definitely wanted people to see it. A sign next to the statue of a man named Nathaniel Northwest, according to his plaque. Northwest. Now why does that name sound familiar? I feel like I've heard it somewhere before. Is it in the journal? She asked Dipper, who pulled the book out of his bag, flipping through it. You know, it does actually sound familiar, he admitted. But, I don't know. If it isn't here, it might take a minute to... They're the founders of the city. The four heard a voice from behind them, turning to see a familiar redhead smiling at them, her hands in her pockets. Sup, dorks? Hey, Wendy. Dipper smiled, almost immediately making Ben snicker from beside him. Dipper elbowed the boy in the gut almost immediately in response, walking up to Wendy like nothing had happened. I didn't think you'd be here today. Pioneer Day didn't really seem like your thing. What, you don't think I like being surrounded by idiots? Why else would I hang out with you guys? She joked, draping her arms around the group, pulling them in for a hug. You guys have no idea how good it is to see you losers right now. Really? Dipper asked. He found himself smiling at the implication. Yeah, of course, dude. After what happened last time, hanging out with all my other friends doesn't really feel normal, she explained. Dipper could definitely understand that. She was the only one of her friends who had been targeted by somebody who had claimed that she was a totem, whatever that meant. Even the Pines-Tennyson family really hadn't figured it out completely, and they had been dealing with it all summer so far. Compared to that, Wendy's friends probably didn't connect as well. So, the Northwest? Gwen asked, bringing the attention back to the previous line of questioning. At this point, she had been in Gravity Falls long enough to know that knowing something was better than knowing nothing. Any new bit of information could be helpful for later. They're nothing special. Just a bunch of tools, Wendy replied plainly. Rich tools, but still tools. How rich are we talking? Ben said, his interest a little piqued. That rich. Wendy gestured to a family within the crowd. A family who the town almost seemed to part for. They were in the family's eyeline, but they could tell that this family was somehow looking past them. Heck, the family seemed to be looking past everybody, which was a feat, considering the massive amounts of people around them. The massive amounts of praise heaped onto them were somehow background noise. The father and mother seemed to be dressed to a frankly absurd degree. Even in the somewhat casual attire they were wearing, there were still actual diamonds hanging around them. To some degree, they looked like they expected to be at an opera instead of the fair. Heck, they could even spot pearls hanging around the mother's neck. But it was the daughter who really caught their attention. She looked about their age, but that was where the similarities between them began and ended. Their daughter's face was perfectly made up. Her hair looked like it had been brushed 1,000 times before she even stepped out of the house that morning, and it pushed down her shoulders in weirdly unnaturally smooth waves. In essence, everything about her looked perfect. Way too perfect to be natural. Dang, that's actually kinda creepy, Ben found himself muttering. He saw Gwen nodding behind him. It's like seeing a painting come to life. That is uncanny. As the twins spoke, they saw the look on the daughter's face was getting slightly irritated. They also saw that she was looking in their direction. She was already to begin with, but now her stare seemed to be actively focused on them. Did you guys see that? Dipper replied. Did she hear you two? No way, dude, she'd be too far for that, Wendy replied. But you weren't exactly hiding how your faces looked. The twins looked at each other. They had definitely both seemed equally unimpressed, and they definitely both had that weirded out look sprawled across their faces. Oh, that's not good. Oops, the both of them replied next to each other. At this point, the young daughter had broken off from her family and started walking towards the group. Excuse me, but I couldn't help but notice that you were staring, and not with the respect that I deserve. Her voice rang in their ears before she had even fully moved next to them. She threw her hair over her shoulder like she was in a shampoo commercial or something, making Ben snicker. And I immediately don't feel bad. Great first sentence, lady, Ben snickered, Dipper jabbing him in the stomach with his elbow. Sorry, we were just talking about something else, Mabel replied, reaching her hand out to greet the girl. As if there's anything else important enough to be talking about, she said, staring at Mabel's hand, not doing anything about its presence. Well, that's a heck of a response, Dipper replied. The girl blinked, letting the implication of that statement sail right past her. If you're going to be staring at us, you should do it up close and personal like the others are. And you shouldn't be doing it with that look on your face. At least the other people in this town know respect, she said, her eyes half folded over in a look of disappointment. Wendy blinked, her eyes wide. She was used to the Northwest being, well, awful. She was so used to it, in fact, that she wasn't going to say anything about this, but she had to admit, this was a new level of pretentious. So you're here not just because we were looking at you, but because we weren't, I don't know, worshipping you? When asked, the look on the girl's face hadn't changed. We don't even know you. The blonde girl before them looked her up and down. Now that I think about it, you definitely don't look familiar, and we've seen everybody in this town at least once. She gestured behind her at the majority of the town, each tripping over each other to try and get glimpses of her. Since they come to see us, like I said, they have respect. She wore a bit of a proud smile on her face. Whoever brought you to this town must have done a great disservice not informing you. Pacifica Northwest. She said her name as though it itself was made of gold, and that they should treat it with the utmost care. Gwen found herself staring at her family, exchanging looks to make sure that she was in fact seeing what she thought she was seeing. Oh, and I'm Mabel Pines, Mabel practically shouted, shaking the girl's hand, even though she hadn't offered it. Pacifica looked a little bit horrified at the contact. And this is my brother Dipper. She practically grabbed the boy and shoved him forward to meet her. My cousins, Ben and Gwen, and this is our friend Wendy. She shoved all of them forward. Wendy herself had actually seen Pacifica before, but she doubted the girl remembered her. It's really nice to meet you, Mabel smiled. If you want, we could hang out. We're probably going to be exploring the fair, and... Pacifica tore her hand away before Mabel could shake it any further. She gave Mabel a laugh that wrung a pity to everybody else. You expect me to waste my time with you, she said. From her tone, it didn't sound like she even knew it was an insult. I have a purpose here today. I have to stand on the stage with my family in a few hours. People came from all over to see us. I'd hate to disappoint them. Mabel seemed to register something of an insult, standing stunned for a moment before recovering. Well, if you want, we can hang out after. Pacifica shook her head. Someone from my family can't be seen associating with a member of Stanford Pines. I have to take myself somewhat seriously. Seriously? Of course. Look at my family. They had already taken in the countenance of Pacifica's family, of their suits and ties and jewelry that likely cost more than some people's houses. Even now they were standing like statues, like they expected to be admired as art. And look at yours. The Pines Tennyson family looked at Stan. He was goading passerbys. He had attracted a good line of people eager to try and dunk him. He was also hurling insults like there was no tomorrow, raking in a pile of cash from people who hadn't yet realized they'd been duped. The gap should be quite clear. I just came here because from the way that you were looking at me, you didn't seem to be aware of that. She began to turn away from the family, most of them not really knowing how to respond to her, and she clearly hadn't expected a response in the first place, It was quickly becoming clear to them what kind of rich she was. She was, my word is law kind of rich. The kind of rich that expected everybody to fall in line with her presence. And the sheer lack of ability to be able to process the amount of stuff that just came out of her mouth was giving her exactly what she wanted in the moment from most of the family. Most except that was for Ben. "Wow, you suck," he said plainly, like he was pointing out that the sky was blue. There wasn't any malice in it. Gwen watched her brother try to insult people before. Actively try. Ben could be pretty vicious when it came to insults. This was just him observing. And it made her smile. It made Dipper smile too. Mabel was still busy trying to process her feelings of the last few minutes, but Wendy, she was snickering like there was no tomorrow. Man, she really loved this family. "Excuse me, I must have something in my ears." Pacifica turned around to face Ben, her eye twitching. "I definitely must have misheard you." "No, you didn't. You definitely just suck," Ben continued. Pacifica stiffened, her body almost becoming statue-like in the moment. She had definitely never experienced any kind of pushback before. Ben knew that immediately. "Really? Someone like you is going to insult me?" She narrowed her eyes. "Compared to me, you might as well have crawled out of the gutter." "Holy crap, that's the best you got, isn't it?" A smile began growing on Ben's face. He had gotten so used to the Omnitrix that he hadn't had the chance to destroy someone as Ben Tennyson in a while. "I will gladly be from the gutter if it keeps me away from you. Your family looks like they came from Barbie's dream house. You know your dad could only be more stereotypically rich if he was literally the Monopoly man." Pacifica flinched again like she was getting punched, forcing herself to regain her composure. She almost began breathing heavily, like this was physically exerting her. "You're trying to insult me for being rich? What, are you jealous?" She scoffed as if the insinuation was absurd. "Not really," Ben shook his head. "At least I know people like me." Pacifica flinched even harder at that insinuation. "Everyone's out here worshipping your family because, what, hundreds of years ago some guy in your family did something a little bit cool? Is that seriously the bar for you? Has anybody since then done anything even remotely impressive? Because looking at you all, it seems like you're allergic to doing basically anything." Ben watched as Pacifica's face went red with irritation. Her hands were shaking at her side. "At least my family's done something. We have gone down in history. I can wear my family name with pride. A pride that you could never hope for, Pines." "Well, Tennyson, actually," Ben corrected her. "Same family, probably long story." The girl before him scoffed, as though the detail didn't matter. "And what has your family ever done, Tennyson?" She tried her best to puff up her chest, to fully embody all of the history of the Northwest family, to let her pride come back to her. That was until literally every member of the Pines-Tennyson family, and Wendy, began laughing at the question. None of them could exactly tell Pacifica. And granted, most of the older members of their family hadn't really done anything, but them? These four had accomplished a great deal ever since setting foot in Gravity Falls. Not many people got to fight aliens and monsters before they hit puberty. Even Mabel cracked a smile a bit, realizing the girl in front of her had probably never done anything even half as cool as ride a giant mosquito or glitter bomb an alien bounty hunter. More than you can dream, princess. Not that it matters." Pacifica raised an eyebrow at Ben. Ben completely ignored her. "You guys want to check out the fair? I'm sure there's something fun to do in this place." He turned to the rest of his family, missing Pacifica's actively reddening face at the boy's turn into completely ignoring her. Sure?" Mabel replied, her voice slightly quieter than he was used to. The others behind the girl agreed more enthusiastically. Especially Gwen, who knew exactly what her brother was doing. The boy had a knack for finding exactly what people were irritated by, what would make them the most angry. It was why Ben got into so many fights back home. And Pacifica had literally gone out of her way to be noticed by the Pines-Tennyson family. She was extremely irritated by the idea that they weren't giving her enough respect. So leaving like this, just pretending that she didn't exist? Yeah, that was gonna get under her skin. "You think you can just walk away from me?" Gwen heard the girl's voice actively diminishing behind them as they walked further and further into the crowd. A voice that became more and more indistinct, the insults flung disappearing into nothingness, replaced by the overlaid voices of the crowd, a lot of which had now congregated around Stan Pines. His insults were now starting to have a much bigger effect, as more and more townspeople tried in vain to dunk him in his rigged tank. Gwen shook her head, knowing that this was only going to encourage the old man. Nice going, Tennyson, Wendy nudged Ben. I don't think I've ever seen someone get on a Northwest bad side that quickly. What can I say? I have a natural talent. Ben smiled, putting his hands on the back of his head as he walked, taking in the environment. And more importantly, the lack of something in it. Mabel's voice. You okay back there? He turned to her, seeing her face a lot more serious than he had seen it before. Oh, yeah, I'm fine. Mabel stuttered out, glancing around at her family, especially her brother, who had all but told her with a single glance that lying to them would be pretty much pointless. I just have a couple of things on my mind. I mean, for one thing, I never really met anybody like that, she explained. Pacifica just kind of acted like I wasn't even there. That's never really happened before. Wendy put a hand on the girl's shoulder, looking into her eyes as she did. Mabel, she sucks. Well, yeah, but... No, she sucks, Wendy repeated again, drawing a slight smile from Mabel as the girl wiped the tear forming from the corner of her eye. Mabel formed a slight smile on her face, nodding to the others in an attempt to let them know that she was okay, even if she didn't really feel it. You can't let a Northwest get under your skin. Your family's way cooler. I mean, a few weeks hanging out with you guys and I was fighting monster hamsters and a guy with a spaghetti strainer on his head. Wendy joked. Mabel smiled and nodded, opening her mouth to say something else, but getting interrupted by Gwen. Yeah, how are you doing with that, by the way? Gwen asked, turning to Wendy. They had seen Wendy's in the following days past the mall incident, but they hadn't exactly had the time to talk. She pretty much just kept leaving right when work was up, which was definitely unusual for her. She wasn't even goofing off at her job that much lately. Fine, mostly. Wendy tilted her hand into so-so fashion. I mean, I've just been thinking a lot, you know? About the whole totem thing. She scratched the back of her head. I'm fine figuring all this out with you guys. If anything, the whole supernatural thing is a bit exciting. But it's a little weird having people hunting you when you don't even know why. Yeah, I get that. Dipper scratched at his cheek. None of us have ever even heard of this stuff before we got here, and we've more or less been on the defense the entire time. Basically, Gwen replied, sighing. It was extremely irritating to her. Every time a situation had gotten dangerous or unpredictable or supernatural, they never initiated it. The closest they came was that whole mess on the boat. It made her a bit on edge, to say the least. And the journal Dipper found, it didn't really help. If anything, it just made her more anxious. Apparently, a third of the stuff in Gravity Falls was extremely dangerous, and it could easily pass as normal at any given moment. So, the best defense was full-blown paranoia, and she wasn't exactly eager to go down that route. There's a lot going on around us, and I know it can all feel like a bit much, Wendy said in a joking tone. Yeah, Gwen said, snickering a bit. But if we let that get to us, we'll never let our hair down, right? I guess not, Wendy replied. We might as well enjoy ourselves, right? Wendy nudged the team, especially Mabel, the girl in question seemingly having cheered herself up quite a bit. You want to go check out the fair? Go get scanned by some carn artists? She received nods from most of the family almost immediately. Mabel, however, just stared at them for a moment. There was something itching the back of her mind besides the fact that Pacifica just made her uncomfortable. You could have sworn she saw that image on her sweater before. She scratched her head. Where had she seen it? She shook it off. Yeah, let's go. Max Tennyson walked through the forest, each footstep reverberating around the trees, echoing back at him, reminding him that he was alone. Unfortunately, that had to be the case. He and Stan had just about found the ship, but they hadn't figured out how to open it yet, and the sooner it was done the better. They couldn't afford to wait again until the kids were asleep. For all Max knew, somebody was bound to stumble upon this thing sooner or later, and that would open up a whole other can of worms. Alright, well it has to be around here somewhere, Max muttered to himself. It was a bit of a pain retracing the same steps that he had taken at night. There weren't usually a lot of visual indicators. He had been walking around for a good half hour, and he was only still partially sure that he was going the right way. Unfortunately, he was a little out of practice from his days of being a plumber. A real plumber, that was. He stopped in his place after stepping over a fallen tree. That tree he had remembered meant he was close by to the ship. And there it was. As he looked up, he spotted it directly over the foliage. Bingo, he smiled to himself. He moved beside the ship, his mind already moving through 1,000 different methods of prying it open. The bag over his shoulder contained quite a few things from off-world, things the duo hadn't tried yet. No matter how advanced Earth got these days, especially with people like the Starks hanging around, sometimes it was best to still handle alien problems with alien solutions. But he didn't get the chance to prove that theory. When he got to the ship, he saw to his complete confusion that the door to the back was opened. He knew that just didn't happen. Someone had to have done it. And the ship's occupants were under lock and key. The Gutget saw to that. So, someone had to have gotten in. He could only imagine why, or what they could have taken. Okay. Dipper razor focused on the area in front of him. On the colonial-themed carnival game, a stack of old-timey pilgrim's hats taunting him as they were stacked into a pile he was supposed to knock over with the ball in his hand. He had already missed 2 out of his 3 shots. He could feel Wendy's eyes behind him. Somehow, that was only making the situation even worse. Dipper at this point must have undergone at least 10 life-or-death situations, but winning a stuffed animal? This was his greatest challenge yet. He reached his hand back, ready to unleash the ball, and... You gotta be kidding me. He heard Ben grumble. What is it, Ben? Dipper asked in a tone that made it clear that it had better have been the biggest emergency of all time. He looked in the same direction to see the bobbing up and down of a pure white mane styled into a pompadour, and almost immediately he took back everything he was thinking. You've gotta be kidding me, he said in roughly the same tone as Ben did a moment before. Gideon? Dipper groaned more to himself than the people around him. He wasn't acting normal. Dipper doubted that Gideon had even the capacity to act normal, to be fair, but he was skulking around the edge of the forest, not really entering the town, more like he was watching them, or more specifically, watching Stan Pines. Watching their grunkle with the look of curiosity, almost like he just wanted to make sure he was there. There wasn't any malice in his expression or anything like that, which made Dipper all the more unsure of everything. He knew that Gideon wasn't exactly the biggest fan of their family. Dipper glanced to his sister, who was focused on the boy with a razor-sharp glare, a worrying look building up in her face. She looked like she was on the verge of running to the car and locking the doors. You don't see his partner anywhere, do you? Ben shook his head, a thankful look crossing his face. Looks like the universe decided not to screw me on that one, so now, Charmcaster's not here. Ben sighed, watching Gideon inch even further towards the forest. And it looks like Pompadour's not gonna start a fight, so I guess it's safe to ignore him. I guess so, Gwen said, her tone pretty unsure of the situation herself. I think maybe we should go after him, Mabel said, her voice sounding angry at herself for the suggestion. The rest of the Pine Tennyson family, and even Wendy, looked at the girl like she had just lost her mind. Seriously, dude? Wendy asked, crossing her arms. I wasn't even there for most of it, but from the stories you told, I think next to that guy is the last place you should be. I didn't say I wanted to follow him, Mabel pouted, the thought sending shivers up the girl's spine. It's just that you said you wanted to know more about the totems, right? Mabel asked, to Wendy's hesitant nodding. Well, Gideon probably knows more than we do, right? That is a good point, Gwen said, slouching her head. He does have a journal, we found that out. She rubbed her eye. At the very least, he knows about one. That's where he got the stupid pyramid drawing. Mabel slightly flinched when the drawing was mentioned. There was something about it right now that was tickling the back of her mind. The same kind of tickling feeling she had when she thought about the image on Pacifica's shirt. Wait, but we interrogated Gideon, didn't we? He said he didn't know anything else, Dipper said. Yeah, he did, Gwen acknowledged. But it doesn't mean he couldn't point us towards somebody who does. I mean, if we did do this, it would be us asking for trouble, and we usually don't do that. For good reason, since it finds us so frequently. Which does kind of make this perfect, though, right? Mabel offered. For once, they wouldn't see us coming. Sneak attack. Ben tilted his head at the girl. Are you feeling okay? Forming plans like this isn't really your thing. Mabel puffed up her cheeks in an attempt to look insulted. It didn't work very well. Instead, the girl just resembled something like a chipmunk, making Ben now have to fight the building urge to laugh. Hey, I can do things. Yeah, relax. I'm not arguing against that. It's just you usually don't try to do stuff like... Wait, this isn't because of what Blondie said, is it? Ben asked, Mabel pausing and tilting her head away from him. Seriously? You're still letting her get under your skin? I destroyed her. I didn't like how she looked at me, okay? Mabel crossed her arms. She didn't even think I was important enough to shake my hand. Well, I'll show her who's important. The girl breathed out of her nostrils hard enough to make Ben half sure that he saw smoke coming out of them. You do know that if we do follow Gideon, she's not gonna be there, right? Ben asked. Mabel ignored the question, instead asking a different one that she knew would lead Ben in her direction. Well, would you rather stay here and watch these people worship the Northwest? They hadn't gotten on stage yet, so the family knew it was only a matter of time. And they hadn't seen Pacifica since she left. Ben was pretty sure that the girl wouldn't be able to have a comeback for him anytime soon. But he was also pretty sure that if he did wait until she had a comeback, and she had a stage full of people to cheer her on, that probably wasn't going to go very well for him. Okay, point taken then, Ben replied, propping himself up from the wall that he had just been leaning on. Let's go. Dipper groaned. This was the first time he was having personal time with Wendy in a while, without the world imploding. The last thing he wanted to do right now was go looking for trouble, especially going to talk to Gideon of all people. But he knew that if he told Ben that the boy would probably make fun of him, or worse. So instead, he cleared his throat. If Gideon's out for revenge on us, we should probably have some people here, right? Watching the family, making sure he doesn't go after Stan. I mean, we can't expect Uncle Stan to get out of anything by himself. Ben gave the boy a suspicious look, as Dipper did his best impression of an innocent smile. And I take it you're volunteering for that? Ben asked, raising an eyebrow. I mean, someone has to, right? He replied. You know, it might actually not be the worst idea, Gwen offered, Dipper smiling thankfully at the lifeline. Wendy was more than willing to keep hanging out, but she also looked a little torn. The girl was clearly curious about what they were doing. She had just gotten herself dropped into all of this after all, and it wouldn't hurt to get a bit more information about it. But if this was going to be something dangerous, and some people had to stay out of the way, she probably should have been one of them. These people had been doing it for a lot longer than she had. Alright, fine, Ben said, narrowing his eyes slightly. We'll go check it out, and you and Wendy can stay here and knock over bottles. I mean, you do have your last shot left, and I'm sure you won't miss, Ben said, barely hiding a smirk as he dropped that little bit of taunting to get into Dipper's head. He watched as it was already beginning to take shape. Dipper turned back to the game as his family left, and it suddenly looked a lot more intimidating than it had a moment ago. Just a few words, and that ball in his hand felt a lot heavier. Dang it, Ben, he scratched at his cheek. The boy had a real knack for getting under his skin with such little effort. No wonder he was able to do it to Pacifica. Wendy nudged the boy, nearly making him drop the ball as his body tensed up. Are you sure we should be leaving this to them? Dipper took a deep breath and nodded to her. Well, I mean, Grunkle Stan doesn't really know anything about this town. About what it's really like, anyway, Dipper reasoned. Plus, we need to take our breaks where we can get them. Trust me. These things happen to us way too frequently not to. And it's just Gideon, they'll be fine. He doesn't have any of his cronies backing him up. And if they're not fine, they know where to find us. He gave his best attempt at a reassuring smile. Seemingly, that made Wendy relax. She took the ball from his hand and threw it, knocking down the pile of hats with a casual toss. Well, if we're gonna relax, we might as well do something a bit more fun. We both know the tank is rigged, so... Wendy began, letting the implication hang in the air. We both know how to unrig it. Dipper grinned, the two of them bumping fists with one another. Let's go dunk him. The trio from the Pines-Tennyson family walked side by side, mostly in silence as they watched the white-haired boy who had given them some of the roughest days this summer move ahead of them. That was until the boy got up to a clearing. He funneled into his bag and pulled something out. Something leather-bound that looked very familiar to them. It had the same six-fingered handprint on the front that was shown on Dipper's journal. If anything, it was basically exactly the same, aside from the number. He actually brought that thing here? Ben questioned, furrowing his brows. They all figured that he had one. They figured that he probably hid it somewhere, they just didn't know where to look. They mostly assumed he would have hidden it in a safe space. Why bring it out of hiding? Well, Mabel, you definitely picked a good moment to poke around, Gwen admitted. She glanced at Mabel's face, seeing it look very proud at the moment. Well, you made the big find. How do you want to play this? She asked the girl. Mabel looked to Ben and shared a mischievous grin with her cousin. Let's jump him, she offered. Oh, totally, Ben agreed. Gwen rolled her eyes. Dipper wasn't here right now, so of course she wasn't going to get any actual plans out of the other members of her family. But those two's blunt instrument approaches were pretty successful from time to time. And she did offer, so she moved to follow their lead. Gwen raised her fingers in the air to mark the countdown that they could all follow to get into position. as she watched the 2 other members of her family hide behind the trees. She moved her fingers to her countdown. 3, 2. So you ran off into the middle of the woods? Really? They heard a voice from behind them. I can't believe I let myself actually get curious. It was loud and pompous, and since Gideon was already here, that could only mean one other person. You've gotta be, Ben began. Kidding me, Mabel finished. Of course you weren't up to anything special. Nothing that could cause you to look at me that way anyway, like you were somehow better than me. The voice of Pacifica Northwest rang through the air. You're literally skulking through the dirt. Ben got up to shout at the girl to shut her mouth, but out of the corner of his eye he noticed something. Gideon had noticed them. In that moment, a not great situation turned into a very not great situation. Ben ran forward, clicking the dial on his Omnitrix, but before he could let it loose, he was blasted back in a windstorm that pushed him up against a tree. Gwen charged up her powers, forming a makeshift barrier around the 3 of them with her constructs, her necklace glowing against the new darkness that had begun rapidly filling the sky. Mabel managed to brace herself, grabbing Pacifica as she too was blown back. What's going on? Pacifica swallowed hard, taking in the sight around her, turning to the girl who had gripped her like iron, supporting her in the windstorm. In the moment, she didn't even think of shirking the touch off like she did before. Well, dealing with this is what our family does, Mabel replied to the unfinished question. Her eyes once again focused on Pacifica, specifically on her sweater, on that logo on the corner. It tickled her mind again, but this time, it was like the dots finally connected. That llama. She had seen that llama before, on that drawing from the journal they had taken from Gideon, on the wheel of... No frickin' way, Mabel muttered to herself. This girl was a totem? Now she really didn't know what they did. She at the very least thought she would like all of them. Mabel was so completely caught up in the thought that she had missed it. Had missed the glowing aura around Gideon's journal. Had missed it shaking and rattling as it flipped itself open, hanging in the air. A loose cackle starting to come out of it, drifting through the morning sky. Suddenly the glow lifted from the journal as it began taking shape into a strange silhouette that seemed vaguely to remind them of the thing in the center of the drawing, of the demon that had supposedly been involved in their lives for so long. Suddenly, the silhouette gained color, the figure twisting and twirling into the sky with a fluidity that somehow surpassed even water. Oh, Gravity Falls, it is good to be back! Dipper and Wendy were practically cackling as they watched Stan bumble his way out of the dunk tank, water spilling out from every inch of his clothing. What made it even better? Dipper was the one who threw the shot that dunked him, redeeming himself from the mess of before. Wendy had discreetly unrigged the machines moments before while talking to Seuss. Dipper smiled at the girl. Man, she was really cool. He realized how often he had been thinking that lately. Wendy bumped him on the shoulder. You're awesome, man. You know, you were right. It's really cool to have a chill moment like this, just not worrying about anything. I'm really glad you think so, Dipper smiled. Things were going pretty well. A lot better than you expected, actually. He was beginning to feel not so nervous. If things kept going at this rate, who knew? He might actually be able to spend the day with Wendy. And if he could do that, well, he honestly didn't really know. He would need to make a plan, but that would be for when he got there. Do you want to do something else? He asked. Sure, dude. I'm pretty sure I saw some people selling fresh tomatoes. We could get some to chuck at the Northwest, or... Wendy's eyes widened as she looked off into the distance. Hey, Dipper, it wasn't supposed to rain today, was it? She asked, pointing towards the woods. Dipper glanced in that direction, his stomach dropping like a stone as he saw the darkness swirling over the sky. The one time he trusted the others to handle something without him. This really sucked. And he was having so much fun, too. He took a step in the direction of what looked like a forming hurricane, only to stop, furrowing his brow at something in the same direction, coming out of it. A figure stumbling out of the forest in a hood. Dipper couldn't quite make out its face underneath the hood, but he could kind of make out what it was holding. It looked big. Something kind of alien-looking. Like from the bounty hunters who had chased them down a while ago. His eyes drifted between the two spots, between the figure running from the woods and the looming clouds. Were they related? Would the others be chasing this hoodie guy too? Or would they be in the center of the darkness? He furiously scratched at his head, knowing he had to make a choice. So, he forced his body to make the decision, as he felt his body barreling towards the hooded figure, chasing it down. He could only hope that he had made the right choice. Hey everybody, as always, it's fantastic to be back. I'm really sorry the time between uploads is a bit long right now, but honestly I've just been really busy. But we got to the first appearance of Bill Cipher today. I was really excited to get to it. I felt that this was an appropriate place for it to happen, especially because in Classic Ben 10, Ben gets face to face with Vilgax himself pretty early, so introducing one of the main villains by now feels pretty appropriate. I'm pretty excited for the next part and some of the stuff that I've set up. Since I'm doing a few more stuff with the totems this time around, I got to introduce the concept of Pacifica being one earlier on. And next time I get to deal with Bill Cipher and the mysterious person who ran away from the alien ship. In the meantime though, if you like this video, please let me know by leaving a like. Be sure to let me know what you thought in the comments, and be sure to subscribe so you don't miss out on the future of this or any other series that I produce. In the meantime, I've been your captain, and it's been a pleasure to take you on another tour of the strongest Earth in the multiverse. I'll see you next time!